Hi, welcome to Astrobabble. I'm Donna from Donna B Astrology,
And I'm Linda from Scallywag Astrology.
and we're going to talk about the lunar eclipse today.
So, lunar eclipse is when we have a full moon and we have the lunar nodes close enough to the luminary, the moon or the sun, because they're opposite each other at the time. Within 3 degrees and 45 minutes, it will be a total lunar eclipse. And if it's within 12 degrees and 15 minutes, it will be a lunar eclipse of some type. And unlike a solar eclipse, where only a certain portion of the Earth will be able to see the actual eclipse, with lunar eclipses, if it's nighttime, you'll be able to see it. If you're daytime, you won't.
Right. And a way to explain the nodes is if this were the Earth, it's a little darker than we like it. And this circle right here would be the orbit of, well, how the sun would look on from the Earth. Actually, the sun, the Earth goes around the sun, but if this is how it looks, and this is the elliptical, and this is where all the planets reside in a space about like this around that elliptical of the planets that we're using in the constellation and for astrology. This would be and resemble the moon's orbit. So if the Earth were here and this is the sun's orbit, the moon's orbit goes around on this silver one around here, and the nodes are where these two connect right here. So as they go through, where as the luminary, as the moon goes around, the moon kind of wobbles every once in a while, so these will go back and forth, and that's what creates a when you see it in retrograde. So it can go like that, or it can go it's really tight. It goes back and forth, but that's how, and that's why they're different, and that's why those nodes change, because this part is the north, and then this part would be the south node from here to there. So that's how they go. It all runs on the elliptical.
Yeah. And because the moon has like a 28-day cycle, it's making a connection to that node. You know, the moon does come to the north or the south node every 14 days, but it has to be the moon's making that connection with the node, plus it's a full moon, so the sun is opposite, or it's a new moon when the sun is conjunct. So it happens about every 6 months or so. Yeah.
And they usually happen, they go in that, they follow that same Saros cycle, but they don't number them in Saros cycles for the lunar ones.
Yeah, I think Saros cycles, as far as I'm aware, they're only for solar eclipses, which are really interesting because they belong to a family. Every 18 years and about 10 days, you get an eclipse from the same family, but it will move from, so if like this, we've got one coming up at 10 degrees Taurus. This is in May, early May 2022 or late April 2022. But the previous one was at like 0 degrees of Taurus. So it's moved that 10 degrees because it's 10 days. So 18 years ago, and you know, how many days? So solar eclipses tend to be more external, things outside events happening to you, because eclipses tend to be a little bit shocking, a little bit surprising. They can kind of shine a light on something, you know, that's been a little bit hidden or, you know, swept under the carpet. So solar eclipses tend to be external, whereas lunar eclipses tend to be more internal, tends to be a little bit more emotional too.
And are we ready to talk about what will it do in the houses?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so if it happens in your first house, you might want to be like ending something or finishing up a project that you've been working on. That would be a thing that could happen.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a lunar eclipse happening in your second house, this is events quite possibly sudden. Maybe you've been kind of ignoring financial issues because this is a house to do with your personal finances, your income, and your resources. So something regarding that might come to light at this time.
And if it is in your third house, it's going to have a lot to do with finishing up things in your community, whether it's, you know, school projects, or, if you wanted to do something in, like the center of town, and you are finishing up that group or whatever, that would be a manifestation of eclipse happening in your third house.
And if the lunar eclipse is happening in your fourth house, this is the house of your home, living situation, real estate, and your family, particularly your parents. So this could have something to do with your emotional connection with your parents. Maybe something comes to light. Maybe you've been kind of ignoring something, or other family members, or it could be related to your house, your home.
Yeah, and if it's happening in your fifth house, it'll have to do with your children, or your creative projects you're finishing up. So, I know for in up here, the kids are getting out of school. They might have been working on a play all winter, and now they're finishing it up. And so that would be totally what I would expect to do with the fifth house.
The sixth house. If the lunar eclipse is happening in your sixth house, this is traditionally a house of illness. It's also kind of like a little bit of an irritating house. Quite often you got a malefic in the sixth house. It's kind of like just irritating things. You catch every red light when you're going through, particularly if you're trying to get somewhere in a hurry. It's just an irritating house. It's the joy of Mars here. So something coming to light in the sixth house, it could have something to do with your health. It could have something to do with pets, because that's also indicated by the sixth house, or it could be working conditions. And it could also just be, that daily irritation that you get sometimes, but it's likely to be something surprising, unexpected, shining a light on it. And yeah
or possibly even, all of a sudden deciding, hey, I'm gonna, finally have that foot surgery I've been putting off.
Yeah, quite possibly.
That was for
Or
sure.
you thought it was going to be, you were like, I don't know about over there, but over here we have waiting lists for some hospital things. And it's kind of like you thought you're going to have to wait a year or two, but suddenly somebody's cancelled and you're, able to get in quickly, So
Right. Yeah.
that could certainly be something like that.
Right.
Or like you said, you've decided because it's emotional that, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to get it done.
Right. Or at least get the process started. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then if it happens in your seventh house, you might be making the decision to change up your relationship, because the seventh house has everything to do with the one-on-one relationships you have with people. So it could be, finishing up a relationship or changing it in some way. You might decide to change, stop whatever you're doing now and then change into doing something different. So I would look for that. If you're thinking about it, this would be the time it would crop into your brain.
Yeah. And if the lunar eclipse is happening in your eighth house, this is other people's money, it's debts, loans, financial agreements, it's resources that you share with others. And it can also be death, though we're not saying that somebody's going to die, but eclipses are said to sometimes eclipse people in or out of your life, or events or things in or out of your life. So that is a possibility, but normally that would not be necessarily what's going to happen. It could be that you've decided, this financial agreement you've been wrangling with your ex needs to be sorted now. Maybe you've been resistant to it, or they've been resistant to it, and now, maybe some sort of, okay, the time is now. This is what needs to be done. Move on. Let's finish this.
Yeah. a lot, and that could happen if you're in the ninth house. You could be wanting to finish up, a degree. If
Mhm.
you are, anything higher education. So if you've been, working on a project that you need to get done so that you can continue or complete your higher education, this would be probably a time that you would choose to do that,
Mhm.
because it's all
Mhm.
that internal, my own thoughts. So
Yeah. And it's also the house of foreigners and overseas travel. So matters related to that might factor into that as well.
legal matters as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Mhm.
Yeah, hopefully we'll end soon.
And if this is happening over your 10th house, this is the house of your career, public reputation. Yeah, it's fame. It's also notoriety. So, yeah, something could come to light at this time. It could have something to do with work, with bosses, and or just regarding you. If you've been trying to hide something, unfortunately, this might be a time when it comes to light. Um, Hopefully not. But yeah, this is a very, very visible house. So yeah, but it would tend to be shocking, surprising, something you didn't expect.
Okay, so for the 11th house, if you have it happening in your 11th house, you're going to be changing up things that you have with groups. So if you are, if you have a group of, that you have gotten together, you might either be deciding to end it or change it up,
Mhm,
because this
mhm.
has
Yeah,
things to do with, the people that are in your life that support you.
yeah. With the 11th house too, you got that hopes and dreams. So I think particularly since this is the lunar eclipse and it's likely to be quite emotional, maybe there might be a turning point. Maybe you decide, you know what, I'm going to go for it. Or, maybe it's kind of a time when you're actually kind of reaching a goal. So that would be nice too.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if it's the 12th house, this is the house of our undoing. So yeah, this might include addictions, self-defeating habits, escapism. So it could be a case of this is a time when you're kind of exposed. It's also associated with places of confinement. So this could be prisons or hospitals, but it can also be places of retreat, spirituality, monasteries, places like that are often associated with the 12th house as well. So something to do with one of those matters could be coming to light at this time or could be spotlighted. But yeah, and as we said, it's quite emotional. So maybe it's kind of like, maybe it's kind of very internal and maybe it's like, you know what? I don't need that habit anymore. It's not working for me. And yeah, I'm going to do
Time to get
something
rid of
about
it.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, with the and with all the eclipses, if you're a Cancer rising, these are really, the eclipses tend to work on you a little bit more than the other person,
Yeah.
those who don't have Cancer for rising.
Mm.
So be
Because
watchful of that.
if Cancer is your ascendant,
Yeah,
that means the moon is the ruler of your chart. So yeah. Also, there's a technique called annual perfections, and we're going to have to do a podcast about that.
that would be
Um,
fun.
yeah, I love annual perfections. And if you're in a year where the sun or the moon is the lord of the year, yeah, eclipses are going to be more significant that year.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes eclipses come along and they just don't seem to make any difference to your life. It's probably because it's not making a connection with your chart. Usually you would want an eclipse degree to be either conjunct, which means right on it, opposite, or square it, and probably within about 2 degrees either side. So if the eclipse degree was, say, 10 Taurus, we would want it from, say, maybe 8 Taurus to 8 to 12 Taurus, or Scorpio, Aquarius, or Leo.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just might not, feel it. Sometimes eclipses come and go and, it just doesn't impact you. Other times it's like, wow.
Yeah, yeah. Let's hope the wow factor isn't so wowie. I have the solar ascendant or the solar eclipse on my ascendant, and this lunar eclipse is going to be on my husband's ascendant. So
Mhm.
we have some work cut out for us. It looks like
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's
it
all
has
part of being
lunar
an
first.
astrologer, living through these events and then kind of thinking, oh, that's what that means.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's very revealing, and it's very nice to know that. All right, I've been through this. I kind of know what that is. And yeah, so it's helpful to know for sure.
Yeah. I think we were talking before about the solar eclipses and how they have that 18-year cycle. But I do know that there's a thing, I think it's called a metonic cycle with the moon. And I think that's 19 years. So yeah, we love this book, don't we, Donna?
Yes, this is yeah, this is our eclipse
This is
our
our
eclipse Bible.
Bible.
Yep, it's our eclipse Bible.
Yes, Bernadette Brady. And I'm sure I heard a whisper a couple of years ago on a podcast that she might be writing a book specifically about the lunar eclipses and that, or a book that includes more information about that. So, yeah, I'm really interested because, I mean, there's all this information about the Saros cycles and how we can relate different solar eclipses together. It'd be really interesting to be able to do the same thing with lunar eclipses if possible. So we don't know at the moment, but yeah, but still we look forward to it. And I do wonder, you know, and I mean, because every 18 years you have the nodes come back to where they were.
Right.
You know, so every 18 years you're going to have the kind of same houses of your chart highlighted. So whether that's the solar eclipse doing it and the lunar eclipse is just along for the ride, or, you know, whether the lunar eclipse is kind of, you know, doing a 19-year cycle and the solar eclipse doing an 18-year cycle. I don't know.
I think the solar eclipses are a little bit more impactful from what I've been
more
reading.
External. Yeah. They're easier to kind of relate to and go, that happened.
Yes. Yeah.
Other than I felt this way, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting subject, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot on it. I mean, the nodes are used through not only Hellenistic and traditional astrology, but it's also in Indian astrology. It's
yeah.
There's all different kinds of. Probably Chinese astrology uses the nodes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
they've been around for a long time.
Yeah, it was the ancient Babylonians that, with the solar eclipses, put it together that they're in these Saros cycles. So yeah, just it blows my mind that these ancient people had such incredible detailed knowledge.
Yeah, the first eclipse that was recorded was March 5th, 1223. So that is a long time ago. That's BC.
Wow.
In case anybody was wondering, that was BC that they were realizing that the eclipses have and are part of the same family as they go up, you know, a chart or up, you know, through their cycles. Yeah, that's
and I just remembered a story I read years ago about the lunar eclipse and Christopher Columbus, and because he and his crew were on an island or were on somewhere, and the indigenous people had welcomed them and had fed them and, you know, helped them every way that they could. But Christopher Columbus and his crew were kind of, you know, like they say, what is it, visitors and fish smell after 3 days.
Yeah.
So yeah, they kind of stayed their welcome, and the indigenous people were getting very impatient with them, wanted them to leave. Christopher didn't want to do this, and but he had an almanac which, you know, had all this information, and he knew for where he was there was going to be a lunar eclipse. And as we were saying with a lunar eclipse, as long as it's dark at the time, everybody can see it. So like half the world can see a lunar eclipse, as long as you're in the right hemisphere sort of thing. And he knew that there was going to be a lunar eclipse, a total lunar eclipse. So the moon looks blood red at that time because the Earth's shadow falls on the moon. And he knew that that was going to happen that night or the next night or whatever. So he goes to the person that's in charge of the Indigenous people, and he says, our God is not happy, that you're doing this to us, and you're going to know about it. And then, this lunar eclipse, it's blood red, and and the Indigenous people are like, oh, so we better help them. So I just thought that blew my mind, having that knowledge kind of saved them, because I kind of got the impression reading between the lines, they might have been, it could have been very, very brutal. They could have been killed or, But I will find the link for that and put that in the description. But I just remember when I was looking into eclipses years ago, reading that and just thinking, that's brilliant. And I'm sure there's plenty of other really, really cool stories.
Yeah, just one example that astrology can help you out.
Astrology saves.
Right. Okay. So for these eclipses, they really only will impact you if they're hitting your natal, if they're hitting your natal chart within like 2 degrees. They have to be within 2 degrees on it or square it. So that's, so if you're looking at your chart and you're going, oh, I have something at that degree, it has to be within 2 degrees. So when we say that this a lunar eclipse will happen at X, it's got to be within 2 degrees of that. So
and we had a look at some it's really hard to find charts, typing into Google famous people, lunar eclipses, events, and it, Google isn't, it's not set up to help us that way. But we did have a look at some events at the US Sibley chart, which is the chart, and it is a little bit controversial because there are a few different people have different opinions about the chart for the US, which is the chart for when the US was founded, I suppose, as a democracy. Is it?
A country.
Is that what the founding fathers called it? Did they independent nation or?
Yes, an independent nation.
Anyway, so we had a look at some lunar eclipses that happened just before some big events. We had the Alamo, which is a very famous event. And Donna can tell us about that, but I'm Australian, and even I've heard of it. I don't know what it is, but I've heard of it. And we've got Pearl Harbor, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which brought the US into World War II. And we have 9/11, which, of course, everybody knows what that is. So, so I might bring the charts up.
That'd be great.
Oh, and then me and Donna, because I'm sure the astrology is a bit kooky at the moment, we got a little bit distracted and had a look at the Aries ingress charts, but they were very, very telling, I thought. And and we've done a podcast about Aries ingress charts, so we will actually put that in the description. But this is the US Sibley chart, the chart for the USA.
Yeah, I did a history on through the houses, what the learning the houses through the Sibley chart. So this is the same chart that we used, and I find it when we use it, I find that it's very telling when you match it against, eclipse charts, Aries ingress charts, the whole thing. So I'm pretty comfortable using this Sibley chart.
I am too. I really like it, and I know a lot of astrologers are very happy with it too. But there are people that say, oh, that's not the real chart. So I just wanted to kind of say, I'm not saying this is definitively it, but we like it and we use it. So and as Donna said, we did that podcast on Saturn through the houses. That was really interesting, and I'll drop a link to that in the description as well. So that is the Sibley chart. You can see it's got an ascendant of 12 degrees Sagittarius, which will be very telling. And we're just going to have a look what we call a biwheel. So we have the Sibley chart, which is the chart for the US. So it's like a natal chart for the USA. And then on the outside, we will have the chart of an event or an eclipse. So we had Pearl Harbor in 1941, the bombing of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, which led to the US entering the war. And that was the 7th of December, 1941. But the prior eclipse was the 5th of September, 1941. So I'm just going to bring that up. The lunar eclipse, which means it was a full moon. So the sun and the moon are opposite, and it's at 12 degrees of Pisces.
Right. And this happened in the water. Pisces is a great example of exactly where it happened in the 6th house. When you're ever looking at a mundane chart, that has everything to do with the Navy or the armed services. And Saturn is the planet that rules ships. So
yeah,
for it to be really in the 6th house is very telling.
Yeah. That eclipse degree, 12 degrees of Pisces, is also square the ascendant of this Sibley chart. And squares are tension, challenging, it's stress. And the ascendant represents the country.
Yeah.
So in general, so yeah, it's really interesting. We also had Jupiter in the eclipse chart, very close to Mars in the Sibley chart. Mars is aggression, and the 7th house in a mundane chart, in a chart that, you know, it's not for a person, but for a country. The 7th house is
open enemies.
Yeah, other countries.
Enemies.
Yeah. So interesting, because it was aerial, and Jupiter is travel, and I imagine it would
far away
aircraft. Yeah, from a foreign country. So yeah. But I just thought it was rather striking that that eclipse was square to the degree that ascendant descendant axis.
Right, and the ruler of the 6th house, where that Saturn is, that looks like an H in that outer wheel. That ruler is in the 11th house on Saturn.
Yes. Oh, that is interesting.
So yeah. That definitely points a finger.
Yeah. And then we had the lunar eclipse prior to 9/11. So the 9/11 obviously was the 11th of September. The prior lunar eclipse was the 5th of July, 2001 at 13 degrees Capricorn. And we have the lunar eclipse here. Here's the moon. Here's the sun opposite at 13 degrees of Cancer. And inside here, you can see 13 degrees Cancer is actually the sun of the Sibley chart. Yeah.
So that has a lot to do with the vitality. The sun has a lot to do with vitality, if not the ruler. But I mean,
yeah.
But Uranus is right in the 3rd house, is on the natal moon of the Sibley chart, which is, you know, shocking.
Yeah. It's interesting too. The natal Uranus in the 7th house had Saturn on it, and Saturn is, you know, structures and that, but it's also the malefic. It's a greater malefic. You got 2 malefics there. Not good. Yeah, and with this eclipse, it was happening over the 2nd and 8th house axis of the Sibley chart. So the 2nd is finances and that, and then the 8th is, amongst other things, death, or in the case of a mundane chart, national mourning and that as well. So
right, and that's where the South Node is. That it's in the same house. Co-present, that moon is in the same house as the South Node, which means taking away.
Yeah. It's quite worrying. We've got Pluto here at 13 degrees, very close to the ascendant of the Sibley chart at the same time as well, and Mars not far away, that aggression.
Yeah, it's just amazing on how these charts just speak the history.
Yeah, and then we have the lunar eclipse prior to the Alamo. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Alamo?
Okay, the Alamo took place in Texas. It was a little fort that was held by Americans, and they were outnumbered by a lot of military from the Mexican government, and they were trying to take that land, I believe. And there's a saying, remember the Alamo, and it's, the spirit of don't give up and, keep fighting. And
Even if it feels like you're outnumbered and
right. Yeah. And they were victorious at the end. So it became very much a folk tale in the United States.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm Australian, and I've heard of the Alamo and heard people say, remember the Alamo, probably from, movies and TV and that. And I didn't know the, in-depth story, but its fame has spread that wide, which is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, those were the heroes that came out of it. I'm sure there were many that I'm just not thinking of right now, but yeah. And the moon is right on the descendant. It was a lot of death. I mean, they were really outnumbered. It was quite a bloody battle. You have Jupiter right there in the 8th house on the sun, on the natal sun. So that kind of gives you a little bit of picture of what was going on.
Yeah. That lunar eclipse, the moon right on the descendant of the other people, the other country, open enemies. So yeah, really interesting. And I really like that the ascendant of the eclipse chart is right on that Neptune in the 10th. So it's become part of your, not mythology, but like you're saying, folklore, and it's part of your culture, and it's part of, just part of the mythology of your country now. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have Uranus in the 3rd house, right on the moon.
That Uranus in the on the moon makes me wonder if they were kind of ambushed a little bit, maybe, like they weren't expecting it at that time, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
And we have the Aries ingress charts here too. So for the Alamo, which we were just talking about, do you want to explain what the Aries ingress chart is?
The Aries ingress chart is when the sun moves into the sign of Aries, and that occurs every spring or March, usually around March 20th. It's the first day of spring. It's the equinox. It's the spring equinox here. Do they call it the fall equinox down below the equator?
We call it autumn down here. Yeah.
Okay. The autumn, the autumn equinox. But it happens in March. And when that sun goes into the Aries, we call it the Aries ingress. And when you apply that to the place of every country, you can get an idea of what every country is going to face for that year, which is really, really cool. And these are so telling. We did an episode on the Aries ingress for a couple of countries on what we're expecting in the year 2022. And they're very interesting. We looked at ones from previous years, and
I'm really starting to like the Aries ingress chart. Yeah,
for mundane astrology, and that is what the entire country will be developing or will be experiencing. It was one of the first types of astrology. When the king said, when do we plant? The astrologer would say March 20th or something like that.
When do we attack this other?
Or should we attack that tribe? Or, is the king going to die? Is the queen going to die? Those are major things that would affect an entire civilization. And so an astrologer would look at the charts. For over 3,000 years, we've been doing this and determining the outcome of the country, what would happen. And they predict floods, they predict crop decline, earthquakes. Yeah, it's just a multitude of things that you can look at in an Aries ingress chart.
Yeah, they're fascinating.
Yeah. Yes, they are. So this is the Aries ingress chart for 1836. So that would be for the Alamo, right?
Yes, this one's for the Alamo. The Alamo was in early March, around about the 6th, I think.
Oh, so this is
So
1835.
it's actually the prior Aries ingress, so it takes all the way around. But yeah, so this
Okay.
is
I'll put my
1831.
glasses on. It's 1835. All right, yeah. So yeah, this would be before, because the Alamo happened March 5th. So this is before the March 20th. So this is going to be the end of
Yeah, the very end
the
of this
previous
Aries
year
ingress
of when
chart,
that
yeah.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that Mars in the 7th house of
Open enemies.
open enemies, yeah, very telling. And Saturn up in the 10th. Mind
Yeah.
you, Saturn is in Libra, so it's exalted, so that's nice. They did, stand their ground.
Yep, they did.
Yeah.
But still, the moon is in the 12th house. They did have fatalities. I mean,
Yeah.
it was.
I'm trying to think. That was at 12 degrees. What was the degree for the Alamo?
I don't remember.
Let me have a look. It was at 12 Gemini.
Okay.
So 12 Gemini. So you've got the Gemini Sagittarius axis highlighted. 12 degrees. So that's right conjunct that North Node in the 6th house of trouble. Yeah. It's the 12th house is sometimes associated with death, and the 6th house is
Service.
Yeah, oh, actually, that's interesting, because you were talking about military and that being the 6th house. And I mean, these were kind of like, wasn't it kind of like a fort? So soldiers would have been out there, I imagine. I don't know.
I think so. I think so.
So.
Or yeah, well, the 6th house is also jobs that you do that you don't get high acclaim for as well.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
would put service,
Public
medical doctors, nurses, anybody in the medical. They usually come from the 6th house as well.
Yeah. Also the house of illness. I don't know if that applies here at all, but just interesting that, yeah, they were defending, this fort. And yeah, that's very reminiscent, I suppose, of soldiers, military, that sort of thing.
And again, the ruler of the 6th house is Mercury in Pisces, which it doesn't like it there, and it's retrograde. So that for sure is telling you, it's not totally positive.
No, it's like you said, it's Mercury in Pisces is not only in detriment, it's in fall. It's and then it's retrograde. So it's being trined by Mars. So
yeah, definitely not happy.
Mm.
Mars being a malefic planet that creates or causes, well, it doesn't cause, but it creates the energy for separation and burning and that type of energy.
War, violence.
War.
Yeah. Actually, I was just thinking, because the eclipse degree was 12 Gemini, so that means that Mercury, its ruler, is actually square it. So yeah, what is Mercury rule? The 9th house of foreign countries, and the 6th house of yeah.
And that South Node in the 12th house, just because I know that in the Sibley chart, that 12 degrees of Sagittarius is the ascendant of the United States. So that South Node is right on the ascendant of the United States.
Of the Sibley chart. Interesting. Must have been rather demoralizing to lose all those men.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then we have 1941 Aries ingress chart. This was March 1941. The Pearl Harbor was 7th of December 1941. So it fell within this Aries ingress chart.
Right. So this being an Aries ingress chart, what is the world up to? You look at the ascendant always, and then you look, and that is Libra, and that is ruled by Venus, and she is in the sixth house, which is not a good house. It's Mars is joy, right?
Yeah.
And Venus does not is opposite to Mars.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting that Venus is exalted in Pisces. And yeah, the eclipses. So the eclipse just prior was 5th of September, which was 12 Pisces. So the eclipse was falling over the 6th and 12th house at this time. And we were talking about the 6th house can be related to your military, your armed forces, and it was a naval base, I believe, Pearl
Yes.
Harbor.
Yeah, and Pisces again, water is signified.
We've got Jupiter in the 8th. That's the ruler of this 6th house. Jupiter in the 8th of death. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of death there. Yeah, the sixth house and the 8th house have swapped rulers.
Yeah, they have.
Jupiter's in the 8th house and Venus is in the
mutual reception. That's interesting. But they're a little bit wide for a sextile, but still. But it's interesting because, I mean, Pearl Harbor is what brought the US into the war, World War II. Yeah, you guys kind of more or less helped, well, had a huge hand in ending that war because, you know, your military guys, your armed forces. Just looking at that Venus there being exalted. It's Venus rule the 1st house and the 8th.
Yeah.
But interesting too, I think when we're looking at these charts too, you mentioned you've got that Pisces, that water. It was, you know, Pearl Harbor, it was a harbor, so water, naval ships, military. So it all fits quite well. I don't think I would have looked at this chart, you know, if I was an astrologer back then and said, oh, this is going to happen. But interesting that the 6th, 12th house was activated.
Yeah. Yeah, in that eclipse before.
The eclipse before was 12 degrees of Pisces, which
is an interesting degree.
It is,
for that chart, because there's a lot of 12s and 13s popping up on there.
There are a lot of 12s and 13s in the US chart.
Yeah.
And this is the Aries ingress for 2001.
Okay, so the Aries ingress, so this is about the country. You look at the 1st house, which is Taurus, and find the ruler of that is sitting in the 12th house in retrograde.
Yeah, and it's trine that Pluto. That Pluto, death, destruction, and the 8th house of death. Trine making it easy for that Pluto to kind of,
to lend its abilities.
Yeah. Yes, Venus is debilitated and retrograde. That's a good point. And I mean, you know, over 3,000 people died in the towers, and Saturn very close to the ascendant here. Yeah.
Which you don't want you really don't want the or those malefics aspecting anything that's important, which and the ascendant is probably one of the important features of a natal chart.
Yeah. And I mean, we've got the other malefic Mars here. It's conjunct Pluto. So it's not just Pluto trying this debilitated Venus. It's Mars.
The Mars.
Pluto. Yeah.
It's an intense. Pluto is intense. Mars is war. So it was an intense event. Yeah, for sure.
And you've got Uranus up here in the 10th house. Surprise. Yes. The eclipse prior to that was at 13 degrees of Capricorn. So that was across the 3rd and the 9th house axis. So 9th house, foreign countries, foreign powers, other beliefs, other cultures.
And Cancer is all about our security. So, or what makes us feel secure.
Mhm. Yeah.
right on that axis is
Yeah.
definitely shook our sense of security.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've heard it said that, America lost its innocence that day. Interesting that the ruler of that eclipse degree, 13 degrees Capricorn, Saturn, is right here on the ascendant, really close.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Pretty strong Saturn. It's in its own bounds.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was
But
very interesting looking at these eclipse charts, and when you put them together with the Aries charts and the Sibley charts, and you add them in with the natal charts of the beginnings of other things, and they're very telling. They're very telling.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very, very interesting. And, for individuals, we look at your natal chart. Instead of using the Sibley, we'd be using your chart, looking at where the eclipses are impacting over what houses, and looking, if any of those eclipses are making any connections to your natal degrees.
Yeah, it's very interesting to watch it happen. And it's very, I mean, I've lived through them before. But it's very interesting to watch them coming at you. It's like a speeding train coming at you. There's no getting off the track. Well,
Yeah,
not that I want to. I don't want to get off the track.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's kind of fun, like, is the hit going to be okay or not okay?
Yeah, yeah.
It's quite
Well,
fun.
I mean, yeah, life is like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Oh,
if anybody needs to find out where their eclipses are going to be happening this year, or just want to find out what their natal chart is saying, you can get a hold of me at DonnaBAstrology.com, or if you want to just write me, you can always DM me on Facebook. I am there on Facebook. But if you want to, for email is donnabarconsulting@gmail.com, and I would be happy to help you with your chart, a reading. I do natal chart readings, electional astrology, horary astrology, and as well, I work with crystals. Go onto my website to find out how those will help you. And Linda, where can people get a hold of you, and what are you doing?
I'm at Scallywag Astrology. That's astrology.scallywag.com. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and I'm doing readings, just natal astrology, look ahead, see what's happening for you, or have a in-depth look at your chart. I also do relationship astrology. So if you want to know how your relationships, going, what's likely to happen. And yeah, I think that's it.
And you're great on websites.
Well, thank you. Oh, yes, I do websites as well. Website and social media, and yeah.
Yes, you are awesome on that, and you're doing a great job at that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And
hope you found this interesting.
Yeah. Don't let it intimidate you. I mean, what can you do? It's an eclipse. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. That sounds a bit brutal, doesn't it? but I mean, like, I've got a whole heap of eclipses coming up, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. So,
you too.
Sometimes you need an eclipse, a change, a shove to kind of do something and move somewhere.
Exactly. Life means change.
It does, indeed. So, yeah, thank you for listening. Please like, share, rate, follow. Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.